So this is a major issue. You've been highlighting it. What's your kind of sense of, I suppose, give us some context to this.
Right. So and hopefully people will on the panel will agree with me here. I think the broad context of where we're at with education is that we're frontline staff when it suits the government, and we're not frontline staff when it suits them as well. Is that fair to say from everyone? I'm seeing nods. They give us the carrot of, don't worry, you will be in the first 30% of vaccinations when they need us, not want us, when they need us back in schools. But then when push comes to shove, we're left on the back foot and forgotten about. I was thinking about this, Rory, after I spoke to you last week, and I was kind of kicking myself for not saying it. And as I said the last time, no offense to the male panelists with us, but it is because it's a feminized workforce. Between early childhood, SNAs, teachers, the vast majority are women. And, the lads in the suits and the doll think they can get away with it. So I think that's probably the broadest context.
Yeah.
We're all back in our workplaces with little to no mitigation changes since September. The situation hasn't changed on the ground since September. There's been no extra safety procedures put in place for us. Apart from since March, the advice now is to double mask. So maybe by mid-May, we'll be told to triple mask. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to just hear the different experiences, because I have to say I've been struck by, it's something you talked about yourself on the live pod about the vitriol the teachers have received. And I was kind of struck by the vitriol the teachers have received, and then the just complete absence of concern, talk about childcare workers, early years workers, and, similar with SNAs as well, that this kind of these hidden workers, child frontline workers. And I do agree with you absolutely about the dominant female, that they're female workforces, because of course we see a parallel issue with public health as well, that they're saying in terms of public health specialists aren't being given a consultant contract, which means they can't do actually the work, which is central to tracking in terms of childcare in schools as well. So I think that's an important point. But anyway, we'll introduce our panel. So
only for the fact that we love our jobs, people are so demotivated at the way we've been treated.
Thanks, Carol. And I think one point that you made there that really stood out to me was that we're not begrudging people who have been prioritised or have received their vaccine for whatever reason. And I think that's a really difficult line to balance, how to advocate for yourself without dragging other people under. And I suppose I've probably been guilty of that myself.
Find out, as you know, Jana, we find out when we're going back to school through Twitter.
Well, it's just bottom of the barrel insulting to, not alone for you and me finding out about it at the same time as Joe Public, but if you think about principals being put in that position where something leaks to the media and then within a minute or two their phone is ringing or they're getting emails from parents concerned, and the principal hasn't even received the circular in their email from the department yet. And on the substitution issue, anyone who has been working in schools knows that for at least the last 4 or 5 years there's been a substitution crisis because of a lack of staff. The only reason why it's coming to a head now is because we're not able to split classes. So in previous years at primary level, if a class teacher was out and a sub couldn't be found, 3 children from that classroom went and visited another classroom for the day and did busy work, and none of us are advocating for that. What else can you do,
In terms of the children themselves and how they are, and it's something I wanted to ask all of you, come in on that, how children are doing, and maybe how some of the more vulnerable children have been affected as well, and how they are, and what support kind of you're able to provide them, and how you see that at the moment.
Manifests in different ways, and maybe later down the line, when you think of adverse childhood experiences and things like that. Yeah, and for myself, I have first class, so I've been in the lucky position that I've had these children since they were in junior infants. I feel like academically, for the most part, the children who have support from home did fine academically over the 2 lockdowns. Some of the parents that really stood up to the mark, and there was a marked improvement academically in the children when they came back. So there are pros from that side of things, but I have noticed since we came back, been a lot of tears in my classroom, and they wouldn't normally be a very tearful bunch. There's a lot of underlying anxiety. I suppose part of that then is maybe forgetting how to socialise, to resolve conflict. Some of the children are presenting with kind of separation anxiety actually from their parents as well. Now, I have to say it is in the minority. The vast majority of them seem to be thriving and they're just delighted to be back in school, but we have been noticing a bit of just like emotional dysregulation, I'd say, and that's obviously something to look out for.
That's really interesting, because even my own kids,
only for the fact
What struck me there listening to yourself, Carol and Linda, is that on the one hand, we're on this podcast to advocate for ourselves as frontline workers, and yet inevitably all of us end up going back to how are the kids feeling, how are the kids experiencing this, and that just goes with the territory. But Deborah, you were talking there about the working conditions, and I know that there was the Big Start campaign pre-COVID for regularization of pay, paid sick leave, basically so that you're actually treated with the respect that you deserve, and it's not there at the moment. So has that and the current work situation kind of compounded that feeling of being undervalued?
Oh, completely. Absolutely. And I think people are exhausted as well. It's just kind of a sense of, when will we ever have something good happen?
Led us to all these school closures,
Yeah, totally. Andrew, when you mentioned there about it being air quote school as normal, that's what they wanted. They've, for some unbeknownst reason, they've decided that the standardized tests in primary school, and the emphasis there being on the word standardized, as in all children take them under the same set of conditions every year so that they can be standardized. They've decided that they're going to go ahead in primary school today. And I'm thinking of my little first class kids who missed a term of senior infants and nearly a term of first class. And how can we standardise their attainment in English and maths? Beggars belief that they're trying to plough on as normal in a completely abnormal year.
Absolutely,
you know?
It's incessant. And what really hurts as well is that when you see it not coming from the media, but you see it coming from fellow working people, we're getting into the same debate that we had around 2010, when we were pitting private sector workers against public sector workers at every single turn.
It's when you see it start filtering down into your Facebook newsfeed, and a friend of yours has commented on a news talk piece or the journal piece, and it comes up on your newsfeed, and you go, wow, that's what you think of me when we're one step removed. Absolutely. And Chris, when you were talking there about standing up for the shop worker or the Tesco worker or whichever, how many of these people who are criticizing us have actually gone and stood on a picket line with the nurses? I stood with the nurses. With the Tesco workers, I stood there and spoke to past students to explain to them how horrible it was for them, unknown to themselves, to be passing the Tesco picket in Drumcondra. I could continue listing these, ringing my little bicycle bell when I was passing the care home on my way to work last year. And I know that all the other trade unionists on this call have done the same, because that's what you do. It's not only being out for yourself. When you are involved with a union, your eyes are opened that you have more in common with any other worker than you do with your paymaster. Rory, could I come in there for my final word? I was supposed to plead with anyone who's listening to this. If any of what any of the contributors this evening has said has struck a chord with you, and it has humanized and put a face or a voice to the reality of our workplaces, yes, they may be a school for your child, but they're a workplace for us. I would just ask that you keep that in mind the next time you find yourself getting triggered by an inflammatory headline or something inflammatory on the radio. I remember Martin making this point to me a few years ago, that parents trust schools with the most precious thing in their life. They hand over their child to us for the whole day, and they trust that we're going to not only have that child alive and fed by the time they get home, but that they're going to have been nurtured and minded, as well as the education. So if you see on the doorstep of your school how much love and attention all of us give your children, please keep that in mind the next time the faceless teacher mob is presented to you in the media, because it's not true. I don't know what it is in this country with the collective, I don't know, is it like a long-term trauma of people's experience of school, or it's the visions of the nuns, but that's not what schools are. Schools are a nurturing place. I don't be thinking about the English and the maths and the Gaeilge. I'm thinking, that child was upset earlier. Are they going home happy today? Have they been soothed? Have their emotional needs been met? And that's what our job is. And I just feel like that's a really important thing I really want to drive home. You know, we care about your children so much. That's why we're in these jobs. Absolutely.